The tomb of Alexander the Great. Where is it hidden? He died surprisingly young. By that time, his army had traveled thousands of miles, and the empire he created stretched from Greece to Egypt and deep into Asia. His name was Alexander the Great. After his death, his generals fought over his enormous empire for decades. But another mystery remained unsolved for more than 2,000 years. Where is his tomb? It seems almost impossible. We know an extraordinary amount about Alexander's life. We know about his campaigns, his battles, his allies, and his enemies. We know where he died, and that his body was eventually taken to Egypt. Yet the exact location of his tomb remains unknown, and that may make it one of the greatest archaeological mysteries of the ancient world. In 323 BC, Alexander was in Babylon. He was only about 32 years old. He had recently returned from his campaigns and was already planning new expeditions. But suddenly he became seriously ill. His condition deteriorated rapidly. Within days, Alexander was dead. The exact cause of his death is still debated. Ancient sources describe different possibilities, while modern historians and medical researchers have proposed several illnesses that could explain his symptoms. Stories of poisoning have also survived, but there is no conclusive evidence that Alexander was murdered. After his death, another problem appeared. What should be done with the body of a man who had already become a legend? There were plans to take Alexander's body back to Macedonia, but during the journey, one of his most powerful successors, Ptolemy, took control of the body. That decision would shape the story of Alexander's tomb for centuries. Ptolemy brought Alexander's body to Egypt. Why? Because possessing the remains of Alexander carried enormous political and symbolic importance. Alexander was no longer simply a dead king. His name had become a powerful source of legitimacy. Ptolemy established his own dynasty in Egypt and made Alexandria the center of his kingdom. Eventually, Alexander's body was placed inside a magnificent royal tomb in Alexandria. Ancient writers referred to the structure as the Sema or Soma, and this is where the real mystery begins. In antiquity, Alexander's tomb was not secret. It was known. People came to see it. Roman rulers were fascinated by Alexander and wanted to visit the final resting place of the legendary conqueror. One of the most famous visitors was Julius Caesar. According to ancient accounts, Caesar visited Alexander's tomb while he was in Alexandria. Later, the Roman Emperor Augustus also visited the tomb. There are even reports that the Emperor Caracalla visited it centuries later and admired Alexander so much that he tried to imitate him. So there is a strange paradox. The tomb was known to people in antiquity, but today we cannot say exactly where it was. What happened? Alexandria changed dramatically over the centuries. Earthquakes struck the region. The coastline changed. Buildings were destroyed. Other structures were built over the remains of older ones. Some parts of the ancient city eventually disappeared beneath later layers of construction. And Alexandria never stopped being a living city. The modern city was built directly over the ancient one. That makes archaeological research extremely difficult. Archaeologists are not searching for a lost tomb in an empty desert. They are searching beneath a modern city. One of the biggest problems is that ancient descriptions of Alexander's tomb are not precise enough to identify its exact location using modern maps. Ancient writers tell us about the tomb, but they do not give us coordinates. As a result, researchers have proposed different possibilities. Some believe the tomb was located somewhere in the ancient royal quarter of Alexandria. That theory makes sense. The royal district would have been an appropriate place for the burial of a king whose name carried enormous political importance. But much of the ancient royal quarter is now buried beneath the modern city. Archaeologists cannot simply remove modern buildings and excavate the entire area. So the search becomes an enormous archaeological puzzle. Other theories have connected the tomb with different underground structures and ancient burial areas. Some researchers have looked toward the necropolises surrounding Alexandria. But none of these theories has been conclusively proven to contain Alexander's remains. And this is where it is important to separate archaeology from sensational stories. Over the years, there have been many claims that Alexander's tomb had finally been discovered. None has been conclusively confirmed. One of the most famous modern archaeological stories involves Amphipolis in northern Greece. There, archaeologists discovered an enormous Hellenistic tomb dating to roughly the late 4th century BC. The monument is extraordinary. It contains impressive sculptures and mosaics, and its scale indicates that it was built for someone of very high status. Because Amphipolis was connected to Alexander's family and his world, some people suggested that the tomb might belong to Alexander himself. But archaeological evidence did not confirm that theory. The tomb is generally associated with another important figure from the Hellenistic period. Still, the discovery demonstrated something important. Even enormous royal tombs can remain hidden beneath the ground for more than 2,000 years. That means the possibility of a lost tomb somewhere beneath Alexandria cannot simply be dismissed. There is another important question. Why was Alexander buried in Egypt in the first place? For the Ptolemaic rulers, possessing Alexander's body had enormous political significance. They were ruling Egypt as a new dynasty and needed a connection to the legendary conqueror. Alexander himself had founded the city that became the capital of their kingdom. His tomb in Alexandria was therefore more than a burial place. It was a symbol of power. That is one reason historians believe the tomb was probably located in one of the most important parts of the ancient city. But centuries passed. The Ptolemaic dynasty disappeared. Egypt became part of the Roman world. Religions changed. Political systems changed. Alexandria itself changed. And eventually, the location of Alexander's tomb was forgotten. Perhaps the tomb was damaged or destroyed by one of the earthquakes that affected the region. Perhaps parts of it were dismantled and reused in later buildings. Perhaps its remains still exist somewhere beneath the modern city. That final possibility is what keeps the mystery alive. Imagine that somewhere beneath the streets of Alexandria, there is still a chamber that has never been found. Inside could be a sarcophagus, and on it, the name of the man who changed the map of the ancient world. If such a discovery were ever made, it would become one of the greatest archaeological events in modern history. But so far, that discovery has not happened. And this is why the story has attracted so many legends. Some stories describe secret underground tunnels. Others claim that Alexander's tomb was deliberately hidden. Still others connect it with different monuments throughout Alexandria. But most of these claims lack sufficient archaeological evidence. And in many ways, the real story is more fascinating than the legends. We know that Alexander died in Babylon. We know that his body was taken to Egypt. We know that he was eventually buried in Alexandria. We know that ancient rulers visited his tomb. And we know that at some point its exact location was lost. That is where the documented history begins to fade into mystery. The most remarkable thing is that Alexandria still contains countless archaeological secrets. Beneath the Mediterranean are remains of the ancient harbor. Under the modern city are layers of buildings that are more than 2,000 years old. Fragments of temples, streets, statues, and inscriptions continue to reveal pieces of the ancient city. So searching for Alexander's tomb is not simply a matter of finding one monument in an open landscape. It means searching inside a living city, and that is why the mystery may survive for many more years. Perhaps the tomb was destroyed long ago and nothing remains. Perhaps it lies beneath an area that archaeologists have not yet been able to excavate properly. Or perhaps one day an ordinary archaeological excavation will uncover a discovery that completely changes our understanding of Alexander's final years. For now, the tomb of one of antiquity's greatest conquerors remains lost. Alexander created an empire that began to collapse almost immediately after his death. But his name survived wars, kingdoms, religions, and more than 2,000 years of history. His achievements left countless traces across the ancient world. Yet the place where his life finally ended remains hidden. And perhaps there is something strangely fitting about that. A man who wanted to conquer the known world left behind an extraordinary legacy. But humanity still cannot find the place where he was laid to rest. For more than 2,000 years, Alexander's tomb has remained one of history's greatest unanswered questions. And until archaeologists finally uncover convincing evidence, one mystery remains. Where is the tomb of Alexander the Great? And what will we learn about him if it is finally discovered?